Welcome, 2023 NHL Eastern Conference standings predictions. That was a mouthful. Kicked the table, so sorry everything kind of just got all jiggly. Everyone above the red line is I have making the playoffs, and everyone below the red line I have missing the playoffs. Devils, Penguins are both the wild card teams, and the top three teams from each division make the playoffs. Again, Eastern Conference only, but let's discuss. There's probably going to be questions. Especially if the longer you look at it, the more questions you may have, because that's going to happen. Metro Division, Hurricanes, I have them finishing first. I don't think that's really much of a debate. Great home record, great away record. They play well in offensive zone, the defensive zone. Their goaltending's been solid. They have Pacioretty back, who is a consistent 30-goal scorer. I don't see much going wrong in the way of the Hurricanes. They play good team defense. They play good team offense. I don't see Kochekov necessarily falling off this year. It's not usually with rookie goaltenders. If they've had success in their first season, they continue that success throughout the remainder of the season and into the playoffs. The next year is kind of the make or break year where teams get books on these players and start to exploit their weaknesses, and the goaltenders need to adjust. So we'll see with Kochekov next year what he does to adjust and all that stuff. But for this year, I don't have any questions. I don't have really any question regarding him. I think he'll be fine the rest of the year. I don't like playing against him. Again, I'm a Bruins fan, but he's good and he's got a little grit to his game. No hate towards Kochekov. That's respectable. But the team as a whole plays excellent hockey. I'd be surprised if they didn't finish first in the Metro this year. Second place, I have the Rangers. What do they have? They're like behind the Devils by 2 points. The Rangers are playing good hockey. Yes, they're not getting the offensive production they had last year from guys like Panarin and Kreider. Yes, their defense has shown some holes throughout the season, but they've improved in all those areas recently. And as recently as beginning of December, they've started to play some really good hockey. Shesterkin still playing at a fantastic level. I don't know his exact numbers right now. Somewhere around a .916 save percentage, which is great. It's great. Halak is turning into a serviceable backup. I had a lot of concerns with Halak coming into the season. I feel like nobody did. I wasn't quite sure why. He's one of those fringe guys now. Is he a serviceable backup? I had my doubts coming into the season, but last few weeks he's looked fine. He's looked fine as backup. Looks like a backup. So that's a positive. Big fan of the Rangers. Well, I'm not a big fan of the Rangers. I like to root against the Rangers, but I'm a big fan of the direction they're heading in terms of the team and the fans. They look good. They play well. It's a good team. Solid team. It's a good team, and they're young and they're growing and they're getting better with each game. So I like the Rangers second place. Third place, I got the Capitals. Capitals playing some hot hockey as of late. Got a goaltender over a .900 save percentage, unlike Vanacek or Samsonov, as he likes to be called now, from last year. Darcy Kemper's great. I love Darcy Kemper. So my only question with them is, will Kemper remain healthy throughout the rest of the season? Hopefully, fingers crossed. Big fan of him. It's always a question with him. Overall, the team's starting to find their offensive game. They're playing much better defensively. And they have guys like Tom Wilson, who's back, who is fantastic. I really mean fantastic two-way forward. He plays excellent defense. He's got all the antics and stuff, but aside from that, he's a very good and skilled and talented player. And physical too. And that's really what the Capitals need right now. And then you got Backstrom, so that should help with the offense. And Backstrom, early in his career, defense was kind of suspect, but at least he's defensively conscious and can help the team buy in to playing team defense a little more than they have been. So for that reason, I have the Capitals skipping over the Devils. Devils, great team. They still got Marino and Bastion on the IR and Bernier, but I'm not too worried about Bernier. I hope he plays. I hope he plays again, but the Devils kind of got their goaltending figured out for now. we'll see. It's a good team top to bottom, but the last, I don't know, month and a half, they've shown that they're a beatable team, and teams are finding ways to beat them. So I don't know how I don't I don't know how they'll rebound from that. I think they'll be, they're a good team. They'll continue to win games, but I don't think they're playing at an elite level that they were at the beginning of the season, and I don't necessarily think they find their way back to playing at that elite level. They have the capabilities, but to sustain that success over a number of games is difficult. And I don't think the Devils, now that teams know how to beat them, will be, I think they'll be a wild card team at this point. Next up, Penguins. Penguins, you got the experience. You got the offensive group with the experience. You got Malkin and Crosby playing on two separate lines. You got Getzel, and you got plenty of weapons. You got Raquel, who's been pretty good playing on that first line. You got the defense. The defense looks solid. You got Jari in net, who's looked great this year. Not too worried about the Penguins. They're an experienced team. They're a good team. They'll find a way to win, and they'll find a way to get into the playoffs. They always do. So their offense, their defense, they're not scoring at a rate they have been scoring at for past years, but they're still scoring. They're finding ways to win. The defense, again, it's an aging team. It is what it is. But they're still good enough to make the playoffs. And I think they're going to barely edge out the Islanders. My concern with the Islanders is the offense. We know they're good in net with Sorokin and Varlamov. We know they're good defensively. Pollock, Pelech, Dobson, just to name a few. Offensively, there are questions. You got Barzell, who's turned into an assist machine. Got some nice dangles going on. You got Brock Nelson, who can put the puck in the net, but there's no real bona fide superstar on that team that can provide some offensive firepower. I have some questions. They're good defensively, but if they need to score, can they score? If they're behind in a game, are they able to, come back with a few goals? We'll see. We'll see, but I think there's still a little work that needs to be done to that offensive group. Flyers, I have them not finishing in last because John Tortorella is their coach, and regardless of who he's coaching or where his team is in the standings, he's going to be hard on his players throughout the entire season. It's gotten them some wins so far. It'll probably get a few more wins throughout the season. For that reason, I'm not picking them last because they're not a good team, but Tortorella is the difference. Blue Jackets are finishing in last. When you try to focus on positives like Korpisalo figuring out how to play goaltender, Korpisalo's getting the starts. Laine comes back. They still consistently lose games. I think they're like 2-8 in their last 10. Brutal season from the Blue Jackets. I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel this year. So I still have them in last. Atlantic Division, I think, is a lot more straightforward. Bruins they have a game in hand over the Maple Leafs and are 11 points ahead, and the Maple Leafs are having an excellent season. So I don't see the Bruins losing that lead. I think it's too big of a lead, and the Bruins are too good of a team to let that lead slip away. In 41, 42 games. But nonetheless, the Maple Leafs are an excellent team. They're consistently one of the best regular season teams in the NHL for the last, several years. Again, the issue with the Maple Leafs isn't if they're going to make the playoffs. It's if they get out of the first round and can win the playoffs. Getting to the playoffs isn't a problem. They have a very good team. I have them coming in second. Lightning are having a great season too. I think they're kind of flying under the radar. You don't really hear much about the Lightning anymore. The team isn't as potent or stacked as it has been in previous years, but John Cooper has them working together as a team. They're fun to watch because of that. They're having a good season. I don't think there's any question they're going to fall out of the playoff spot. I think they're solidly in that third place spot. I don't think they'll catch Toronto. I don't think they're going to fall out of the playoffs. I don't. But fourth place, first team I have missing the playoffs in the Atlantic is the Buffalo Sabres. Now, I think the Sabres are going to make a push. I think it's going to be Penguins, Islanders, and Sabres all vying for that last wild card spot. The Devils may or may not enter that conversation, depending on how the rest of their season goes. But yeah, I have the Sabres missing the playoffs for a few reasons. Their overall defensive structure is lacking. They're incredibly talented offensively. They score a lot of goals. They have a lot of offensive firepower. But in terms of their defensive structure, it's suspect and questionable. Most of the games they try to play is, you're racing up and down the ice, seeing who can score on what breakaway. A lot of stretch passes, a lot of breakaways through the zone for the Sabres, but not a whole lot of defense being played. Positioning from their defense players can be very off. Sometimes you're not getting team defense from your forwards. So for that reason, I don't quite have the Sabres making the playoffs or getting to that point. They've been hot lately. They're a good team. I think they're definitely making strides in the right areas. But I think that needs to continue next year. And I think there are some things they need to address this offseason to get them to be a playoff team. One would be specifically their goaltending. You got Craig Anderson. Dude's old. Hopefully he gets inducted in the Hall of Fame. I love Craig Anderson. His whole career, I've been a big fan of him. Love Craig Anderson. Is he enough to get you into a playoff spot? Probably not. But you also have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who is great. A majority of the games he plays, he looks fantastic, and then he doesn't. He's a young goaltender, and there are games where that really shows, and it is what it is. So do you go out? Do you get a more veteran goaltender to do a 1A, 1B with a guy like Pekka Luukkonen? That's probably what I would lean towards. You go out and get a guy like Cam Talbot, like the Senators did, went out and got Cam Talbot to be a 1A, 1B with Forsberg. Forsberg's still young. We'll see. Or like the Minnesota Wild, Gustafsson and Fleury. Fleury is old, Gustafsson's young. Do you kind of get that 1A, 1B going there? Or what? There are questions. Their defensive core is still very young, too. They still have a lot to learn and grow on defense. On the defense side of the puck, we're seeing Dahlin break out both offensively and defensively, but there's still a lot he needs to do defensively. And he's one of the better defensemen in terms of playing defense for Buffalo. If that makes sense. There's a lot of words that said defense in that sentence. Anyway, Sabres almost there. I have them missing the playoffs. Not by a whole lot, but I don't know. Anyway, Senators, I have them getting a little better. I don't know how much better they get. I don't have them making the playoffs by any means. My question is, I guess it's not really a question, it's a concern, and I think it's kind of a concern with coaching, is how do you get your offensive or your forwards to play defense? Because they're not. They're not. The defensive players on the Senators are young. Yes, they still have a lot to grow in their defensive game, of course, but they haven't been all that bad, honestly. The defensemen for Ottawa haven't been too bad in their own zone. Yes, there are instances you can point to and be like, see, this is just out of position. Yes, because these guys are young, they're going to make mistakes. It is what it is. But the forwards don't play defense at all. I mean, look at Batherson's just plus minus alone. That tells you something. Plus minus isn't the greatest stat to look at, but that tells a bit of a story there. And then compare that with a guy like Claude Giroux. Claude Giroux, one of the few guys who plays a 200-foot game. Claude Giroux is pretty good defensively. The rest of the Senators' offensive group, not so much. It's kind of an issue that needs to be addressed through coaching. And I don't think that's necessarily being done. Throughout this whole season, we haven't really seen any strides to their forward group playing any more defense than they were at game one. So that's a huge concern with me, and I think until they figure that out, I don't think they're in contention to even be considered to make a wild card spot. I just don't. There's a bunch of things you have to do to win games. You're not just scoring goals and defend. Well, you're not just putting goals in the net, you also have to defend, or it's not just defending, you also got to put goals in the net. There's multiple aspects. So the Senators, great team. Got some concerns. Panthers, I also have a lot more concerns with that. This is Panthers for me. It's more speculation. You got a guy with Tkachuk coming over from Calgary who has had reports of his inflated ego inside the Flames locker room at times, and with Flames management. You know, that could be a thing. You have a coach in Paul Maurice who was in Winnipeg last year and had to step away on his own accord, which is highly respectable because it's really difficult for a lot of people to do. But had to step away because he lost the locker room. And we saw that with Bonus coming in, stripping Wheeler of the captaincy. They did a lot of team drills. They did a lot of team meetings over there. There was a lot of work to get that culture back to where it needed to be in Winnipeg after Paul Maurice left. And when Paul Maurice was in Winnipeg, the first thing to go was the defensive structure, and that's starting to go in Florida. So again, I'm not in that locker room. I don't have any inside source that anyone else doesn't. I don't have any inside source at all. So this is mostly speculation and kind of trying to put pieces together, but I think there's some locker room issues there. It's a very talented team. I'm not too concerned about what the GM has done so far. I think the GM's done a great job with what he's had to work with. I think he's done great for the most part. But I think for me, it really lies within that locker room, and we'll see. But for that, I don't have the Panthers getting any higher in the standings. I have them actually dropping. Along with the Red Wings. The Red Wings, we saw this last year where they got off to a hot start and then started to fall drastically in the standings. I think the Red Wings are better than last year. I don't think there's any question with that. Yes, you're not getting the same production you got from guys like Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond. Dylan Larkin's having a good... But there are players having good seasons over there, and they are still putting pieces together. So you have, you traded, what was that, third-round pick for Ville Husso? So you had Husso and Nedeljkovic to start the season, both high-potential goaltenders. And Husso's really, really solidified himself as a starting goaltender in Detroit. And that's a huge piece that a lot of teams struggle with for years. Even when their rebuild's done, they still struggle with figuring out who the goaltender is and will be. So that's a huge win. They're getting the right pieces together at the right time. They're still in a rebuild. They've got some veteran guys to help coach these younger guys along, but they're not quite there yet. And we saw that a bit last year. We saw what they could potentially do in the future. We saw some of that at the beginning of the season, but there's still some work to be done. So I'm not too worried about the Red Wings, I still think they're going to be better than last year. Last year was kind of a brutal year, but I have them in 7th, but I don't think their points are going to be as low as they were last year. I think their record is going to improve a bit over last year. So I know it's brutal to see the Red Wings in 7th. I like the Wings. I say that now while they're bad, but it's one of those historic franchises you don't want to ever see be bad. You want to have those brutal rivalries. Those are fun games to watch. Same with the Canadians. Canadians could get good, so the Bruins and Canadians could have some rivalry games going on. That'd be great. Bruins are up there, Canadians are down here, and maybe next year the Canadians and Bruins will be like bottom-dwelling teams. Who knows? That's a conversation for later. But Canadians, obviously in a rebuild. I think they've done a pretty good job so far. They're not in the realm of being years away like the Blackhawks are or the Sharks are. The Blue Jackets, I don't think they've come out and said they're in a rebuild because but they probably should be. Same with the Flyers. The Coyotes, for example. Canadians have a lot of pieces together, that are already performing at a great, clip. They're performing well, some of these pieces, and they're really young. They got a good young core going on. You got a good young captain in Suzuki who's mature but beyond his years, which is fantastic. Man, like, I'm one of the biggest Canadian haters, and how can you hate Suzuki, dude? I'm a big Suzuki fan. Love Suzuki. But they got a lot of pieces coming together. Caulfield, they got Jack-Eye, who's a ton of fun to watch. Kind of slowed down on his impact on each game in terms of points and defensive play and all that stuff. He's a young guy, though. I'm not too worried about that. He'll be out, but he's still fun to watch. There's guys that are fun to watch. And there are guys that are producing. So I'm not too concerned about the Canadians. I think they'll be back in a couple years. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team next year, but who knows? The way they've been progressing, Marty St. Louis behind the bench is getting the most out of some of these players and developing them at an impressive rate. You see some of these young guys coming in and scoring a ton of goals. Cole Caulfield, probably over 40 goals this year. What? What was he, a rookie last year? It's kind of insane. Kid's still young. So, interesting. Let me know what you guys think. I think for the most part, top three solidified in the Atlantic. The middle three, I think you can kind of swap around a bit. Penguins, Islanders. Do you have the Islanders making the playoffs or the Penguins? That's an interesting discussion. I had a lot of issues kind of deciding Islanders or Penguins. But I gave the edge to the Penguins. I think the Penguins have been playing more complete hockey than the Islanders this year. But we know the Islanders, and they're strong defensively and strong goaltending wise, and that always gives you a chance to win a game and be competitive. So you can make a good case for the Islanders as well. Do you think the Sabres surprise people and make the playoffs this year? Knock out a team like, I don't know, the Penguins, Devils, or whoever? That would be really interesting. Fingers crossed for Buffalo fans that the Buffalo Sabres make the playoffs. Sorry I don't have you guys winning this year, or making the playoffs this year, but a winning record for the first time in over a decade is a great step towards making the playoffs next year. So that's all I really got for this. I appreciate you guys watching this long video. Shoot your questions down low. All right. Thanks for watching. Take care, guys. I appreciate it.